interesting. It is this disconnect then that puts people into silos and boxes. And you see this in healthcare all the time. You mentioned healthcare briefly. When people isolate symptoms in the medical model, so often, you dose that up and you create another problem somewhere else. And certainly in psychotherapeutic circles, people talk about, you think you've fixed somebody in the family, and guess what? Somebody else in the family suddenly gets sick or goes off the deep end, and you think, well, obviously, it's like you squeeze a balloon in one bit, but the balloon just pops up more in some other part. So in terms of, this kind of change of awareness and consciousness in individuals, that obviously seems fundamental. And then the sense of joining up with others in movements where you can have solidarity and we can interrogate each other and grow and learn from each other. That seems to be another thing that's coming up very strongly in Cochabamba. But conversely, on a really different level, there is also coming up from Cochabamba the idea of legal instruments. I mean, obviously there are many legal instruments already, but they don't seem to have had that much impact, apart from perhaps the most profoundly kind of intuitive one, if you like, the one that's least legalistic and most to do with these kinds of qualities that we've been talking about, which is the Universal Declaration, which is quite a remarkable document, I think.
Human rights.
Yes, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And very kind of prophetic in many ways.
There's something very interesting about that document. I attended the 60th anniversary celebrations of the UDHR in December 2008. The Elders, a group formed by Nelson Mandela and now including Kofi Annan, Mary Robinson and others, ran a campaign in 2008 on the 60th anniversary called Every Human Has Rights. And I remember Mary Robinson said to me something that's really stuck. She said, read the UDHR and then read it again and realise how simple the language is.
Yes.
And every declaration is written in beautifully simple, understandable English, but not just English, it's been translated into more languages than any other document in history, with the possible exception of the Bible. So it's out, it's there, it's a real document. Now, compare that with the UNFCCC documentation that came out of Copenhagen, which is totally impenetrable. I sat on a panel in the UN in January with various representatives of NGOs and governments, and I sat there myself listening to what they were talking. I'm not a policy expert. I follow the policy, sure, but I'm not an expert. I could not understand what they were talking about. It was Article 2.2 this and 6.1 that, legal instruments here, there and everywhere, how this relates to that. It's become so complex. And it's interesting you mentioned the UDHR because it is very simple and it does tie together that universal sense of human rights.
But it isn't simplistic. It's very profound.
It's very profound. Understandable.
It seems to go to that human universal level in us, which connects us. And
sorry to butt in, and it was written mainly by philosophers. That's what a lot of people don't know about it.
Yes.
Eleanor Roosevelt was one of the key architects of the UDHR, and she actually gathered together mainly philosophers to write that document, which goes back to what you were saying about Lovelock's quote about scientists as natural philosophers. Whereas now it's diplomats
done
and
by
economists and bureaucrats exactly who are writing this.
I mean, the article in the declaration that I know best, I suppose, is Article 19, because it's about media, and it talked about how people, everyone, everywhere, which I found so moving, really. Everyone. There's no some people, someday, one day, maybe, if, it's just everyone, everywhere should have access to every kind of media without frontiers. And when it was written in 1948, it was obviously out of the question, how many people could communicate. But now it's beginning to happen, and it's almost like that wish for people to be all connected is only happening now, and yet they asserted it by seeing that was what was needed and being able to say it, and it's like they really believed that every human had a right to everything, and out of that belief comes a far different kind of vision. And I think, like I said before, 6 billion reasons, it's I am a reason, just by virtue of existence, just each human being has the right. And the same with the Cochabamba discussions in the working groups. I found, first of all, I went into my kind of conventional, hang on a minute, what is all this? You know, kind of intellectual attitude of, can we really be serious talking about Mother Earth's rights? And then within moments, I was kind of drawn in to seeing that this is a really profound and serious way of looking. And I was so happy, really, that people wouldn't push it away in a kind of embarrassment, you know, but really embrace it.
Yeah.
It's marvelous, I think. So we were just talking about Cochabamba, and one of the things that's been important in Cochabamba has been the focus on legal matters when we got diverted to the UN declaration. But there is a similar declaration people are trying to put together in Cochabamba. I wonder if you could talk about what's important about a legal battle.
Well, as I said before, when we were campaigning in Copenhagen, we were calling for a fair, ambitious and binding deal. And this nature of binding was questioned by many of the governments present. But it was governments from Latin America and others, including Bolivia, who were really strongly supporting that need for a binding deal because of this recognition that without that, it's really got very little teeth. And so many of the recent political declarations we've seen, of course, have sadly never been acted upon, including some of the Millennium Development Goals. So one of the things that perhaps has been missing from our arsenal as campaigners are those, rather than using the existing structures and frameworks that are there and trying to solidify those, actually proposing other legal frameworks, legal instruments that can be used to try to solve the climate crisis. But as I say, not just the climate crisis, but so many of the other linked crises as well. And it's going to be very interesting to see if this process that's starting here, I think we need to recognise that Cochabamba is the start of a process, not the finish. The discussions that are beginning in Cochabamba and that will continue hopefully through the World People's Congress will start to develop some of those legal instruments which in future years have the potential to become instruments adopted by the UN and therefore world governments. Whether or not it will do that is yet to be seen. It's been notoriously difficult, I think, for civil society to come together in that level of detail. But there certainly seems to be the energy and the will in Copenhagen to start to have those discussions and try and adopt some of those instruments.
Well, there seem to be a couple of different types of instruments that struck me